boy stands in a field outside Dothan, and the sun is already brutal. He is 17 years old. He is wearing a coat that does not belong in a field, long-sleeved, ornate, the kind of garment a nobleman's son wears to a feast, not the kind you wear when you are checking on your brothers in the hill country of Canaan. But his father gave it to him, and so he wears it. His name is Joseph, and the men in the distance, the ones who see him coming from far off, are his brothers, 10 of them. They have had time to talk, time to remember the dreams he told them about, the ones where their sheaves of grain bowed down to his, where the sun and moon and 11 stars all made obeisance to him. Time to remember the way their father's eyes soften when Joseph walks into a room and harden when they do. Time to build something dark between them, out there in the open fields, far from their father's house. The Hebrew word for what they feel is not simply envy. It is kinah, a burning, a scorching jealousy that has nowhere to go. When you see Joseph coming across that field in that coat, you understand something about human nature that no psychology textbook ever explains as well as this story does. They see him, and they begin to plot. Now here's what you need to understand about Jacob, the father who gave Joseph that coat. Jacob was not a foolish man. He had spent his whole life reading people, outmaneuvering them, surviving. He had wrestled with God and lived. But he made one catastrophic mistake with his sons. And it was not that he loved Joseph more. It was that he made sure everyone knew it. Josephus, writing in the 1st century, says that Jacob's favoritism was visible to everyone in the household: servants, wives, older sons. The coat was not a private gift. It was a public declaration. And in a family already fracturing under the weight of multiple mothers, competing sons, and an inheritance that could only go to one, that coat was fuel dropped into a fire that had been smoldering for years. Joseph arrives at Dothan. His brothers do not greet him. Reuben, the oldest, the one who should have been strongest, says, "Do not kill him," which tells you where the conversation had already gone before Joseph got there. Reuben's plan is to throw Joseph into a dry cistern, a pit carved in the limestone, and come back for him later. He intends to rescue his brother. He intends to take him home. What he does not intend is to leave Joseph's fate in Judah's hands while he is gone. Here's what most people miss about Judah in this moment. Judah is not the villain of this scene. He is something more complicated than that. When the Ishmaelite traders appear on the road from Gilead, it is Judah who says, and notice the logic he uses, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him." He is not saving Joseph out of love. He is saving Joseph because murdering your brother is worse than selling him. He has done a calculation. And Joseph pays the price of it, 20 pieces of silver. That is the price of a boy's life in Canaan in the 2nd millennium before Christ. 20 pieces, less than a month's wages for a common laborer. They strip the coat from him. They throw him into the pit. And then the text says something that should stop you cold. It says they sat down to eat bread. They sat down to eat. While Joseph is in the pit, while he is calling up to them, and we know he called because 20 years later, when everything is broken open, Reuben will say to his brothers, "Did I not tell you? Did I not say, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. So now his blood is required of us." He heard Joseph calling. They all heard Joseph calling, and they ate their bread. The traders come. The silver changes hands. Joseph is lifted out of one pit and placed into another, a caravan heading south toward Egypt, toward a country he has never seen, toward a life he cannot imagine. And behind him, his brothers take that coat, that beautiful, ruined coat, and dip it in the blood of a slaughtered goat. They bring it to their father. They let Jacob reach his own conclusion, and Jacob does. He tears his robes. He puts on sackcloth. He mourns for his son as though Joseph were dead. But Joseph is not dead. He is on a road to Egypt. Egypt is not what Joseph expected. Of course, Joseph had no expectations. He was 17 years old, and he arrived in the most powerful nation on earth, in chains, speaking the wrong language, wearing nothing that marked him as anything other than cargo. The Ishmaelite traders sold him at the slave market to a man named Potiphar. Potiphar is described in the text with a specific title, Saris Paro, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. This is not a minor household functionary. This is a man with proximity to the throne, a man whose house is a place of real consequence. And into that house walks a Hebrew teenager from the hill country of Canaan, who by any reasonable measure should have been broken. He was not broken. The text says something remarkable, and it says it 4 times across Joseph's story, which means you are supposed to notice it. It says, the Lord was with Joseph. Not that Joseph was talented, not that Joseph was resilient, not that Joseph had a positive attitude. The Lord was with Joseph. And Potiphar, an Egyptian, a pagan, a man who worships other gods entirely, Potiphar sees it. He cannot name what he sees, but he sees it. Within a few years, Joseph is running the entire household, every servant, every field, every account, every transaction. Potiphar has handed him everything. The Hebrew word the text uses for what Joseph becomes is menahel, overseer, the one who stands over. And Potiphar, the text tells us with a kind of quiet humor, stops keeping track of anything at all. He knows what he is eating. That is the extent of his administrative involvement. This is the first reversal in Joseph's story, and you need to hold on to it because this story is built on reversals. The pit becomes a palace. The slave becomes a steward. The forgotten becomes the favored. But then comes the garment. Joseph is described, and this is unusual in Scripture, which rarely pauses for physical appearance, as handsome in form and handsome in appearance. Josephus, in his Antiquities, goes further, saying Joseph was of a beauty that caught the attention of everyone who saw him. And Potiphar's wife sees him. She is not subtle about what she wants. The text records her proposition in 4 words in the Hebrew. Shikeva imi, lie with me. No introduction, no seduction. 4 words repeated day after day after day. And Joseph refuses. Not once, every day he refuses. And when you read his reason, you understand something about the man Joseph is becoming in that Egyptian house. He does not say, I won't do this because I'll get in trouble. He says, how could I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He is not calculating consequences. He is operating from a deeper place. He is, the text suggests, a tzaddik, a righteous one. Not because he has never been tempted, but because in the moment of temptation, he knows whose he is. One day she grabs his garment. He runs. He leaves the garment in her hand and he runs out of the house. And in that moment, you might want to say, good, justice wins, righteousness is rewarded, except it isn't. Not yet. Not for a long time. She calls the servants. She holds up the garment, and notice, this is the second garment in Joseph's story that is used as false evidence against him. The coat dipped in goat's blood. Now the cloak left behind in a lie. And Potiphar's wife tells her story, and Potiphar hears it, and Joseph goes to prison. Pay attention to this. He goes to prison for doing the right thing. This is not a small detail of the narrative. This is the narrative. Because if you are reading this story looking for a tidy moral, do right, get rewarded, you are reading the wrong story. Joseph does right, and he goes deeper into the darkness. The pit was bad. Prison is worse. He has lost even the limited dignity of being a trusted slave. He is now a criminal in an Egyptian dungeon. And yet, the text says it again, the Lord was with Joseph. The keeper of the prison looks at this Hebrew prisoner and sees the same thing Potiphar saw, something he cannot name, something that does not belong in a dungeon. And within a short time, Joseph is running the prison. Every prisoner, every schedule, every provision, all of it handed to Joseph. He has gone from the pit to Potiphar's house to prison. And in every single one of those places, the same thing happens. He rises. Not because the circumstances are good, the circumstances are terrible. He rises because the God who was with him in Canaan followed him to Egypt and followed him into Potiphar's house and followed him into the dungeon and has not left him. Stay with me, because the next part of the prison story is where the setup for everything begins. Two men arrive in the dungeon. They are not ordinary prisoners. One is Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, the man responsible for tasting Pharaoh's wine, for ensuring the king is not poisoned, a position of extraordinary intimacy with power. The other is Pharaoh's chief baker. Both have offended Pharaoh in some way the text does not specify, and both have landed in the same prison where Joseph is now the man in charge. One night, they both have dreams. And in the morning, Joseph looks at their faces. The text says he looked at them and saw that they were troubled. And he asked them what is wrong. They tell him. And Joseph says something that should stop you where you sit. Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. He is a prisoner. He has been in Egypt for years. He has no power, no position, no advocate, no way out. And he is offering to help. The cupbearer goes first. 7 good vines, 7 clusters of grapes, Pharaoh's cup filled and presented. Joseph tells him, in 3 days, you will be restored to your position. You will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand as you used to. Then Joseph says one more thing. He says, remember me when it is well with you. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this place. It is the only time in the entire story that Joseph asks for anything. The baker, encouraged, tells his dream. 3 baskets of baked goods on his head, birds eating from the top basket. Joseph tells him, in 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head. And here, the Hebrew does something devastating, a wordplay the original listeners would have caught immediately. He will lift your head from you. You will be hanged. The birds will eat your flesh. 3 days later, Pharaoh's birthday. The cupbearer is restored. The baker is executed, exactly as Joseph said. And the cupbearer, restored to his wine, his position, his proximity to power, his life, forgets Joseph entirely. Here's what most people miss about the 2 years that follow. The text does not record what Joseph did in that prison during those 2 years after the cupbearer forgot him. It does not record prayers of desperation or cries of anguish, though surely there were both. What it records is silence. Joseph stays in prison. He keeps running the dungeon. He keeps being faithful to the work in front of him. He waits. 2 years. 730 days, roughly, in a dungeon in Egypt, after the one man who could have helped him walked out and forgot his name. And then Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh stands on the bank of the Nile. This is his dream. He is standing where every Egyptian king stands in the iconography of his civilization, beside the river that is the source of all Egyptian life, the river that floods every year and deposits the black silt that makes the fields grow, the river that is Egypt. Without the Nile, there is no Egypt. Every Egyptian child knows this. Pharaoh knows this better than anyone. And out of that river come 7 cows. They are beautiful, fat, sleek, healthy, the kind of cattle that makes a farmer's heart move. They come up out of the Nile and begin to graze in the reed grass along the bank. And then 7 more cows come up behind them. And these 7 are unlike anything Pharaoh has ever seen. The text uses the Hebrew ra'ot mareh, ugly of appearance, thin of flesh, gaunt. The kind of animal you see at the end of a long drought when the bones are pressing through the skin. And the 7 ugly cows eat the 7 fat cows. Pharaoh wakes up. He lies in the dark, and then he falls back asleep, and it happens again. 7 fat heads of grain on a single stalk, and then 7 thin heads scorched by the east wind, and the 7 thin heads swallow the 7 fat heads. Pharaoh wakes again, and the text says his spirit was troubled. The Hebrew is vatipaem. His spirit was knocked, jolted, like a bell struck hard. He calls every magician in Egypt, every wise man. He tells them the dreams, and not one of them can tell him what they mean. This is the moment the cupbearer remembers Joseph. 2 years late. 2 years of silence in a dungeon and faithful invisible work, and it takes Pharaoh's nightmares to jar the cupbearer's memory loose. He goes to Pharaoh and he says, and notice he begins with the confession, I remember my faults today. He tells Pharaoh about the Hebrew in the prison who interpreted his dream and the baker's dream, and who was exactly right about both. Pharaoh sends for Joseph immediately. Now here's a detail that sounds small and is not small at all. Before Joseph is brought before Pharaoh, the text says he shaved and changed his clothes. He has been in a dungeon. He looks like a man who has been in a dungeon. And before he walks into the presence of the most powerful man in the ancient world, he makes himself presentable. He does not rush into the throne room unkempt and desperate, grateful just to be out of the prison. He takes the time to be ready. Joseph understands, even here, even now, that how you carry yourself in the moment of opportunity matters. Pharaoh looks at this young Hebrew man. Joseph is 30 years old now, 13 years since Dothan, and he tells him the dreams. Joseph listens, and then he says something that no other figure in this story has said. He says, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Not me, God." He is standing in front of Pharaoh. He is 30 years old. He has been a slave and a prisoner for 13 years. This is the only door out of everything he has suffered, and he opens it by making sure Pharaoh knows that whatever Joseph is about to say does not come from Joseph. There is a word for that kind of character. It is rare in any century. He tells Pharaoh, the 7 fat cows are 7 years of abundance. The 7 thin cows are 7 years of famine. The dream came twice because the thing is fixed. It is decided. It is certain. It is already in motion. Egypt has 7 years of the greatest harvests it has ever seen. And then 7 years of famine, so severe that the abundance will be entirely forgotten. Then, and nobody asked him to do this, Joseph tells Pharaoh exactly what to do about it. Appoint a wise man. Store a fifth of every harvest during the good years. Build storehouses. Create reserves. When the famine comes, Egypt will survive. Pharaoh looks at his officials. He looks back at Joseph. He says, "Can we find anyone else like this man in whom is the Spirit of God?" And then Pharaoh does something that would have been unthinkable in any ordinary political calculation. He takes the signet ring off his own finger. He puts it on Joseph's finger. He dresses him in fine linen. And notice, this is the third garment in Joseph's story. and this one is given in honor, not taken in shame. He puts a gold chain around his neck. He gives him the second chariot. He gives him a new name, Zaphanath Paneah, which scholars debate, but which many translate as the one who reveals hidden things, the man to whom mysteries are revealed. And the man who entered Egypt in chains, who ran a prison from inside a cell, rides through the streets of the greatest city in the ancient world while Egyptians call out before him, Avrech, bow the knee. Joseph is 30 years old. He has been waiting for this since he was 17. Here's what most people miss about the 7 years of abundance. During those years, Joseph does not rest on his elevation. He does not spend his days in the palace enjoying what he has finally received after everything he has lost. He travels throughout all of Egypt. He organizes. He builds storehouses in every city. He collects grain like the sand of the sea. The text says so much grain was stored that they stopped counting because the number was beyond measure. And during those years, he also builds a family. Pharaoh gives him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of an Egyptian priest. And she gives him 2 sons. The first he names Manasseh. The name means God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. And you have to sit with that for a moment. The fact that Joseph names his son Forget. That he is trying to put Canaan behind him, trying to close the door on the pit and the coat and his brothers' faces. The second son he names Ephraim. The name means God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. In the land of my affliction. He has not forgotten. He has never forgotten. He names his sons after the 2 things he is holding at the same time: the mercy that lets him move forward, and the honest acknowledgement that this land, this life, this elevation, all of it was built on top of suffering. He is not pretending the suffering did not happen. He is saying that God was in it. That is not the same thing. And then the 7 years of abundance end, and the famine begins. Not just in Egypt. The text is specific about this. The famine is over all the face of the earth. It reaches up into Canaan, into the hill country, into the tent of an old man named Jacob, who has been mourning a dead son for over a decade. His flocks are thin. His grain stores are failing, and word has come, strange, remarkable word, that there is grain in Egypt, that Egypt has storehouses full of grain because someone prepared. Jacob looks at his sons, and he says, "Why do you look at one another? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." 10 brothers stand up. 10 brothers who sold a boy for 20 pieces of silver, who dipped a coat in blood, who sat down to eat bread while their father wept. Those 10 brothers begin the road south to Egypt, to the one man in Egypt who has the authority to sell them grain, to the one man in Egypt who already knows their faces. They do not recognize him. Of course they do not. The last time they saw Joseph, he was 17 years old, screaming up from the bottom of a limestone pit, and they were eating bread. Now he is 39 or 40, dressed in Egyptian linen, wearing the signet ring of Pharaoh, speaking Egyptian with an accent that belongs to the court, surrounded by officials and translators and the full weight of imperial authority. He is the second most powerful man in the known world. They bow down to him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph, the text says this quietly, without drama, without any indication of what it cost him. Joseph recognizes them. He recognizes them immediately. He remembers the dreams. Now here is the moment you have to hold carefully, because what Joseph does next is almost always misread. He speaks harshly to them. He accuses them of being spies. He throws them in prison for 3 days. He demands they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, Rachel's other son, the one who stayed behind with Jacob, as proof of their story. He keeps Simeon as a hostage. He sends the rest home with grain and secretly with their silver returned to their sacks. People read this and they say, Joseph is getting revenge. He is not getting revenge. Watch what he is actually doing. He is a man who has dreamed, since he was 17 years old, of a moment of reunion and restoration. He is a man who needs to know, before he can give them anything, before he can give himself the thing he has wanted for 20 years, whether they have changed. Whether the brothers who sold him would sell Benjamin too. Whether Judah, who calculated the profit on selling one brother, would do the same arithmetic on another. He is not punishing them. He is testing them. And while he is testing them, while he is speaking Egyptian and using an interpreter so they cannot know that he understands every word they say, they begin to talk right there in front of him. The guilt that has been sitting in their chests for 20 years comes out in a rush. They say to one another, "In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother. We saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us." And Reuben, oldest brother, the one who planned to come back for Joseph, the one who was gone when the traders arrived, Reuben says, "Did I not tell you? Did I not say, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. So now his blood is required of us." Joseph turns away from them. He finds a room where nobody can see him, and he weeps. This is the first crack in the open loop of the story. The moment Joseph turns away to weep is the moment you understand that he has not spent 20 years hardening himself against these men. He has not built a wall. The love is still there. The grief is still there. He is the most powerful man in the room, and he is crying in a side chamber because his brothers are finally, 20 years too late, saying out loud what they did. He washes his face. He comes back. He has Simeon bound before their eyes, and he sends them home. Here's what most people miss about the road home. When the brothers open their sacks on the road, they find their silver, every man's payment returned. The text says their hearts failed them. They said to one another, "What is this that God has done to us?" They are not asking about the silver. They are asking about everything. The famine, the Egyptian lord who spoke harshly and asked too many questions, the silver that feels like an accusation in their hands, 20 years of carrying what they did to Joseph, and now the ground under their feet has started to feel unstable in a way they cannot name. They go home to Jacob. They tell him everything. And Jacob, oh Jacob, who has been holding his grief like a stone in his chest since the day they brought him that coat. Jacob hears that Simeon is in Egypt, that the Egyptian lord demands Benjamin, and he says, "Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. All this has come against me." He is wrong about Joseph. He does not know he is wrong. In the gap between what Jacob believes and what is actually true, that his beloved son is alive, that his beloved son is the man holding Simeon in Egypt, that his beloved son has been preparing for this reunion for years, that gap is one of the most devastating and tender ironies in all of Scripture. The famine gets worse. It has to get worse before Jacob will release Benjamin. When the grain from Egypt finally runs out, Judah stands before his father and makes a promise. Not a suggestion, a promise. He says, "I will be a pledge of surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever." Judah, the one who said, "What profit is it?" Judah, who calculated the price of one brother's life in silver, Judah is now offering himself as surety for another. This is not the same man who stood on that road to Dothan. Something has broken open in him in 20 years of carrying the weight of what he did. And if you are reading carefully, you can see that the whole story has been moving toward this moment, toward whether Judah will be different, toward whether any of them will be different. Jacob releases Benjamin. The brothers go back to Egypt. And when Joseph sees them coming, sees Benjamin among them, Benjamin, who has his mother Rachel's eyes, Benjamin, who was born the same night Rachel died, Benjamin, who is the last piece of home Joseph has left in the world. The text says Joseph hurried away because his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. He finds a room. He weeps again. He washes his face again. He comes back. He throws them a feast, a bewildering, overwhelming feast, and he seats them in birth order, from the oldest to the youngest, which should have been impossible for an Egyptian lord to know. The brothers look at each other across the table. The text says they were astonished. They cannot figure out how he knows. And Joseph, sitting at a separate table because Egyptians did not eat with Hebrews, keeps looking at Benjamin. He gives Benjamin 5 times the portion of anyone else. 5 times. He cannot stop himself. He does not want to stop himself. And then comes the final test. He fills their sacks with grain. He returns their silver again. And into Benjamin's sack, he places a silver cup, his own divination cup, the one that carries the authority of his office. He sends them away in the morning, and then he sends his steward after them. The steward catches them on the road. He accuses them of stealing. The brothers are outraged. They have returned the silver twice. They are not thieves. Search them. And of course, the cup is found in Benjamin's sack. And the brothers tear their clothes. They turn around. They go back to Egypt. They fall before Joseph. And Judah, not Reuben, not the oldest, but Judah, who started all of this with the calculation about silver, Judah steps forward. And he gives the most important speech in the entire book of Genesis. He tells Joseph everything. He tells him about Jacob, about Benjamin, about how the boy's soul is bound up in his father's soul, about how Jacob said if Benjamin does not come back, he will die of grief. And then Judah says the words that answer the question this whole story has been asking. He says, "Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. Take me instead." 20 years after selling Joseph for silver, Judah is offering himself as a slave so that Benjamin can go free. The test is over. The answer is yes. They have changed. Joseph cannot hold it anymore. He has held it through 2 audiences with his brothers, through 2 rooms where he went to weep and came back composed, through a feast where he watched Benjamin eat and could not stop giving him more, through a test that required him to be cold and demanding and suspicious when every instinct in him was pulling in the opposite direction. He has held it for 20 years, really. The grief, the love, the questions, the silence of the pit, the silence of the prison, the silence of God in the long middle years when nothing moved and nothing changed, and the cupbearer forgot his name. He cannot hold it anymore. He says to everyone in the room, the officials, the translators, the servants, everyone who has been watching this strange, prolonged interrogation of these Canaanite shepherds, he says, "Get everyone out." And they go. The text says he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it. The Egyptians in the next room, in the corridor, possibly in the courtyard. He is not weeping quietly. He is not maintaining composure. He is the second most powerful man in Egypt, and he is coming apart at the seams, and the sound of it fills the palace. His brothers are standing in front of him. They do not know what is happening. And through the tears, through the undone composure, through the Egyptian linen and the signet ring and the gold chain and everything that 20 years of another life has built around him, Joseph looks at his brothers and says 2 words, Ani Yosef. I am Joseph. That is all. 2 words in Hebrew, the language of his father's house, the language of Canaan, the language these men have been speaking to each other this whole time while he pretended not to understand. 2 words in the entire architecture of the last months, the harsh accusations, the demands, the test, the cup in Benjamin's sack, collapses into something they could never have imagined. The brothers cannot answer him. The text says they were dismayed at his presence. The Hebrew is nifhalu, terrified, thrown into confusion, undone. And you understand why. The man who has the power of life and death over them in this room, the man who controls the only food supply between their family and starvation, the man they have been bowing to with their faces to the earth, is the boy they threw into a pit, is the boy they sold for 20 pieces of silver, is the boy they listened to screaming while they ate their bread. He is alive. He is here. He is looking at them. Joseph says, "Come near to me." And when they come near, he says, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." He does not soften it. He says it plainly, whom you sold. He is not pretending it did not happen. He is not skipping over it to get to the reconciliation faster. He names what they did. And then, and this is the theological center of the entire story, the sentence that the whole 40 chapters of Joseph's life have been building toward. He says this, "And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Do not be distressed. Do not be angry with yourselves. God sent me. This is not the statement of a man who has suppressed his pain and called it forgiveness. This is not the statement of a man who is being magnanimous from a position of power, performing grace because he can afford to. This is the statement of a man who has spent 20 years in the school of suffering and come out the other side with a theology that can hold both things at once: the reality of what his brothers did, which was evil, and the reality of what God did with it, which was redemption. He does not say what they did was not wrong. He does not say the suffering was not real. He does not say God caused them to sell him. He says God used it. There is a difference, and Joseph knows the difference, and the difference is everything. The famine still, an inscription found on the island of Sehel in the Nile, dated by some scholars to a period consistent with this narrative, records a 7-year famine in Egypt in language remarkably similar to Genesis. Grain failed. The storehouses were empty. People came from surrounding nations seeking food. Whether this inscription refers to Joseph's famine specifically is debated by historians. But what is not debated is this: the ancient world knew what a 7-year famine meant. It meant death on a scale that erased whole populations. It meant the end of everything. And Joseph, a Hebrew shepherd son from Canaan, a former slave, a former prisoner, is the reason Egypt did not collapse. He tells his brothers, "Hurry, go back to Canaan. Tell our father that his son Joseph is alive. Tell him God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Bring him here. Bring the whole family, your wives, your children, your flocks, everything. There are 5 more years of famine coming. Come to Egypt, and I will provide for you." He falls on Benjamin's neck and weeps. Benjamin weeps on his shoulder, and then he kisses every one of his brothers and weeps over them. All 10. The ones who stripped his coat, the ones who counted out the silver, the ones who ate their bread while he screamed from the pit. He weeps over every single one of them. And after the weeping, the text says, his brothers talked with him. Just that, his brothers talked with him. No content recorded, no specific words preserved, just the image of 11 brothers in a room in Egypt, finally able to speak to each other without the weight of a secret between them. Now, here's what most people miss about the road back to Canaan. When the brothers arrive home and tell Jacob, Joseph is still alive and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt, Jacob does not believe them. The text says his heart was numb, Wayafog libo. His heart went cold, fainted, stopped responding. He has been mourning this boy for over 20 years. He has shaped his entire inner life around the certainty that Joseph is dead. And now his sons are standing in front of him saying, he is alive. He is in Egypt. He wants you to come. It is only when Jacob sees the wagons, the Egyptian wagons Joseph sent to carry him, the physical, impossible evidence of Egyptian royal provision, that something shifts. The text says the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived. Revived. He was not just sad. He was not just grieving. Something in Jacob had gone dormant the day they brought him that coat, something essential. And now at the news that Joseph is alive, at the sight of those wagons, it comes back. He says one thing. He says, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. The caravan forms. 70 people, Jacob, his sons, their wives, their children, everyone. They move south through Canaan toward Egypt. Jacob stops at Beersheba, the place where his grandfather Abraham made a covenant with God, the southernmost edge of the promised land. And God speaks to him in the night. God says, Jacob, Jacob. And Jacob says, here I am. God says, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. I will go with you. I will make you a great nation there. And I myself will bring you back. Do not be afraid. It is the oldest promise in the story, the promise that runs through Abraham and Isaac and now Jacob, the promise that what God has started, God will finish. No matter how long the middle takes, no matter how dark the middle gets, no matter how many pits there are along the way. Jacob goes down to Egypt, and Joseph hears that his father is coming. He gets into his chariot, the second chariot of Egypt, the one Pharaoh gave him, and he rides out to meet his father. He does not wait. He does not send a messenger. He does not receive Jacob in the throne room with ceremony and officials and all the weight of his office. He gets in the chariot himself and he rides. When he sees his father, he falls on his neck and he weeps a long time. Jacob, old Jacob, scarred Jacob, Jacob who walked with a limp since the night he wrestled God. Jacob who has been carrying a dead son for 22 years. Jacob says, with his face in his son's shoulder, now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. Not joy first, not relief first, just now I can die. Now it is enough. Now the thing that was broken is whole again, and I can let go. The Hebrew word for what has just happened to this family, what Joseph's forgiveness and God's long silent faithfulness have produced, is shalom. Not merely peace, not the absence of conflict. Shalom means wholeness, the restoration of what was broken to its original design, the putting back together of the thing that was torn apart. In a field outside Dothan, 22 years earlier, 10 brothers tore a family apart. In Egypt, on a road outside the city, A father falls into his son's arms, and the tearing is over. Jacob lives in Egypt for 17 years. 17 years, the same number of years Joseph lived in Canaan before the pit, as if God is giving Jacob back, year for year, the time that was stolen. Jacob settles in Goshen, the fertile delta region Pharaoh set aside for them, and he watches his family multiply, and his grandchildren grow up speaking 2 languages, and his son ride the second chariot of the most powerful nation on earth. He is 147 years old when he dies. And before he dies, he calls Joseph to him. He makes Joseph swear, hand under thigh, the ancient covenant gesture of Abraham's household, that he will not bury him in Egypt, that he will carry his bones back to Canaan, to the cave of Machpelah, to the place where Abraham and Sarah are buried, where Isaac and Rebekah are buried, where Leah is buried. He wants to go home. Even in death, he wants to go home. Joseph swears it, and Jacob dies. Joseph falls on his father's face and weeps over him and kisses him. And then he does what he promised. He takes Jacob's body, with Pharaoh's blessing, with a full Egyptian state mourning of 70 days, with a procession of Egyptian chariots and officials that the Canaanites who see it coming over the hill describe as a very great company, and he carries his father home to Canaan and buries him in the cave of Machpelah. And then something happens on the road back to Egypt that tells you everything you need to know about human fear. The brothers, watching their father's burial, standing at the cave, perhaps looking at the hills around Dothan in the distance, begin to worry. Now that Jacob is dead, will Joseph finally do what they have always feared he would do? Will the forgiveness hold without their father's presence to keep the peace? They send a message to Joseph. They claim that before he died, Jacob commanded Joseph to forgive his brothers for their transgression. Joseph receives this message, and he weeps. Not from grief this time, from something more complicated. The sorrow of being loved so little that the people you have already forgiven are still afraid of you. The sorrow of having given everything you have to give and watching it not be enough to undo the fear in someone else's chest. His brothers come and fall down before him. They say, "We are your servants." And Joseph says, and these are among the most important words in the entire Hebrew Bible, "Do not fear. Am I in the place of God? Am I in the place of God?" He is not saying, "Do not worry. I am too powerful to bother with revenge." He is not saying, "Do not worry. It was all so long ago." He is saying something with actual theological weight. He is saying, vengeance belongs to God, not to me. Judgment belongs to God, not to me. I am not the one who gets to be the final arbiter of what your sin cost. That is not my seat. I will not sit in it. And then he says it again, the sentence he said in the throne room when he first revealed himself, the sentence that is the spine of this entire story. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. You intended harm. God intended good. Both things are true at the same time. The brothers meant evil. That is true. God meant redemption. That is also true. And the place where those two truths meet, the place where human betrayal and divine providence intersect, that place is called the life of Joseph. That is what his life is. That is what his life means. Joseph lives to be 110 years old. He sees his great-great-grandchildren. He sees the family that began with Jacob's 12 sons become, in the fertile fields of Goshen, the beginning of something that will one day be a nation. And when he knows his death is coming, he calls his brothers to him, the ones who are still living, and through them, all the ones who will come after. And he says, God will surely visit you. God will surely bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. He is still carrying the promise, even at the end, even dying in Egypt in the second chariot shadow, in the land of his affliction and his fruitfulness. He is still facing Canaan, still trusting the same God who was with him in the pit, in the prison, in the palace, through every garment stripped away and every garment given back. He makes them swear, the same covenant gesture his father required of him, that when God comes for them, they will carry his bones out of Egypt. And then Joseph dies. They embalm him as Egyptians do, and they put him in a coffin in Egypt. And 400 years later, when a man named Moses leads the descendants of those 12 brothers out of Egypt in the greatest exodus in human history, he carries a coffin with him. The bones of Joseph, kept in a box for 4 centuries, waiting for the promise to be fulfilled. And when they finally reach Canaan, after the desert, after the Jordan, after all of it, they bury Joseph at Shechem, near Dothan, near the field where a boy in a coat once walked toward his brothers and did not know what was coming. He is home. And now 3 things to take with you. The first is this: your pit is not your conclusion. Joseph's lowest moment, the limestone cistern, the darkness, the sound of his brothers eating above him, was not the end of his story. It was not even close to the end. The pit was the transit point between where he was and where God was taking him. And if you are in a pit right now, if you are in the dungeon years, the forgotten years, the years when the cupbearer has walked out and not looked back, you are not finished. The story is not over. The pit is not the last word. The second is this: faithfulness in the small place prepares you for the large one. Joseph did not waste his time in Potiphar's house. He did not waste his time in the prison. He ran both of them with everything he had for an audience of one, the God who was with him and saw what nobody else saw. When Pharaoh's moment came, Joseph was ready because he had been faithful in the moments that did not count, in the rooms where nobody important was watching. Whatever small place you are in right now, whatever dungeon, whatever invisible responsibility, whatever work that feels beneath what you were made for, do not despise it. God is building something in you there that the palace will require. The third is the hardest and the most important, and the one that will take you the longest to fully receive. What was meant to destroy you, God can mean for good. Not that God caused the betrayal, not that the pain was not real, not that the people who hurt you were not responsible for what they did. All of that is true. All of that stands. But above it, not canceling it, not erasing it, not pretending it did not happen, but above it, God is working, shaping, turning, taking the thing that was meant to be your end and making it the corridor to your purpose. Joseph did not get a vision of that on the floor of the pit. He did not get a memo from heaven in the prison. He got silence and faithfulness and the slow accumulation of days in which God was present even when God was invisible. And at the end of it, at the other end of the pit and the prison and the palace and the famine and the reunion and the tears, he could look at everything that had happened to him and say with a straight face, God intended it for good. That is not easy theology. That is not a bumper sticker. That is the testimony of a man who went through the fire and came out the other side and found to his own astonishment that God had been in the fire the whole time. The boy in the coat, the man in the pit, the slave in Potiphar's house, the prisoner who ran the dungeon, the dreamer who became the second chariot of Egypt, the brother who wept so loud the Egyptians heard it through the walls, the son who rode out in his chariot and did not wait, who went to meet his father on the road because he could not stand to wait one more moment. One life, held together by one thread, and the thread was not Joseph's strength or Joseph's wisdom or Joseph's resilience, though he had all of those things. The thread was this: the Lord was with Joseph. Through every stripping and every gift, and every dungeon and every elevation and every tear, the Lord was with Joseph. And if that was true for a boy thrown into a pit in Canaan 2,000 years before Christ, the question the story leaves you with is not historical. It is not theological. It is personal. Is it true for you?